Good afternoon, my friends. How are we today? Today is Thursday, April 2nd, and I'm so happy to be back with you. When you see this come on, I know there's a little bit of a delay, but would you mind giving us a shout out, telling us where you're joining us from, maybe what you're excited about today with my special guest, Christa Watson? Let me know you are here. Who do we have? Hi, Jessica. Good to see you. Oh, I've missed you. And your mom. Darn it. And your kids. I think when the shop opens again and things are a little bit back to normal, however you want to define normal, we're going to have a big old party. Okay, everyone? We just plan on having a big old party. That's right. Hi, Joyce, Patricia, Debbie. Linda, Heidi, Mary Jo, Sue, good to see all of you. We've got people joining us from Texas and Oregon, Michigan, Massachusetts, California, all over the place. I love it. I love it. Mississippi. Welcome, welcome. Pittsburgh, Raleigh, North Carolina, Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada. Yes. Arizona. I love it. You know what? This is the beauty of technology, my friends, is that we can all be together virtually and we get to laugh together and even cry together. If you saw me the other day, I was getting that twitchy nose. I call it the twitchy nose. Oh, darn it, Kris, you're not supposed to be touching your face. That's my problem. I've got lots of problems. I got lots of issues, let's just say. Getting my headset in here. Welcome, welcome. Oh my goodness, thank you, Lindy. She says, I've watched every day from Ohio. Thank you. That means the world to me. Thank you so much. And Christina says she is so excited for today's guest. Me too. Me too. Oh, cute glasses. Thanks, Margie. It's helping me prevent me from touching my eyeballs. So they say that's a big deal right now. So out the contacts go, on the glasses go. It's driving me crazy, I'll be honest. Hello. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, everyone, for being with me this afternoon. I am happy to be here, and I have to share something with you. I thought this was so funny. So real quick, while we wait just another couple minutes before I bring on my special guest, I have to show you what my 13-year-old daughter texted me last night. So I'm lying in bed, I'm getting ready to, zonk out, and my phone goes on. I see I got a message, and she says, Mom, I've decided I think I know what we need. And I was like, really? Really, Rachel, what do we need? And she says, we need a hair-blown cow. And I'm like, a what? A hair-blown cow? Have you guys heard of these? Okay, let me bring up a picture. Here he is. Is that not the cutest thing ever? I'm not getting a cow, trust me. I'll let Kyle here do those things. But the hair-blown cow, that seriously cracked me up. She's like, Mom, look how cute. He's just so cute. I said, is that really such a thing? And she goes, yes. People blow dry their animals. There's pictures. So if you ever want to have a good laugh, you just have to look at like hair-blown cows, hair-blown chicks, all of that. So I was laying in bed just laughing away at my 13-year-old's idea of needing a hair-blown cow. She says, but Mom, look, it's so cute. It's so fluffy. Yes. There you go, Rachel. Thanks for making my day. Hair-blown cows. They are quite fluffy and cute. But no, I'm not going to do that. All right, my friends. It looks like a lot of you are on and you are ready to rock and roll. So let me introduce you to one of my most favorite people in the whole wide world, Christa Watson. How
Yay!
are you, my
Hey,
friend?
Kris.
What
Oh my goodness.
what did you
This is
what did you think
the
about
cow.
the cow? What do you think?
I think that I it was Emily that was on yesterday, right? With the
Yeah,
collage quilts.
yes.
She needs to do one of those. She needs to do one of those.
Oh, a hair blown cow done with her
Collage.
yes, her collage. Great idea.
Yes. You could use what is that, like faux fur for the texture? Wouldn't that be
Uh-huh.
hilarious?
Yes, there you go.
Or some minky, maybe some minky.
I challenge you to take it on.
Oh my goodness. You are a fun way to get going with our day. You are hilarious. I love it.
So I'm wondering, would you see a hair blown cow in the deserts of Las Vegas, Nevada?
Yeah, you don't see any cows.
No.
Maybe a hair-blown lizard or a rattlesnake.
There you go. That would be
No.
interesting. So, Krista and I have known each other for a long time now. She's just such a wonderful, wonderful person. We could talk all day long if we could, and we've been known to talk for a while. we have a
Oh
good
yeah.
we have a good time, and we share lots of great stories. And I'm so grateful that she can join me live from Las Vegas. Well, just outside in Las Vegas, Henderson. Where are
We're,
you?
we're in Las Vegas. We're on the edge of town.
Okay.
It's all Las Vegas, but we're really lucky. We actually live kind of really close to the mountains. For those of you that don't know, here's a little geography lesson.
Okay.
Las Vegas, it's Spanish, and it means the meadows. And even though we don't have very much greenery here, we are in a bowl. Can you hear me okay? Can you
Yeah,
hear me
no,
okay?
I was like, a
Okay.
meadow? I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, it means the meadows.
Okay.
There are some natural springs here, but basically, Las Vegas is a very flat bottom bowl surrounded by mountains. So if you were to look at it, like if you're coming into Las Vegas,
Hmm.
it's all surrounded by mountains with us in the middle. And so we live on the very edge of one of the like really close to a mountain.
Hmm.
And so we can go out into our backyard, and there's desert, and there's little mountains and hills you can climb and see all the little critters around here. But it's deserty, but it's beautiful and it's home, and I love it.
And you've been telling me that you've been taking walks and jogs in the desert because really there's no one there.
There's no one there
Hmm.
except the lizards, and so it's great social distancing for the family. We can get
Right.
out, we can get some fresh air,
Hmm.
and we can get sunshine. So it's great.
Yeah, there you go. Best of both worlds. We had snow today. Can you believe that?
Oh, snow.
Hmm.
Snow is so pretty when you don't have to live in it.
There you go. Exactly. So, Krista, how are you? How are you doing with all of this?
You know, it it's crazy. What's wonderful about the quilting community is how we come together.
Yeah.
There's lots of memes going around the internets and jokes talking about, we're quilters, we're prepared for this. We get to stay in our sewing rooms and use our stashes and shop online, and even though of course there's some sad things going on
Yeah.
right now,
Hmm.
quilting during this time is good therapy.
Yes.
And because of technology, we can meet together. You and I can have a fun chat with
Yes.
everybody else today,
Yes.
and it's like we're a virtual quilt build
Yeah.
today. And
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. I think it's wonderful, and it's uplifting, and it makes me feel great. So I'm
Yes.
doing great today.
Yes. Good. Good, good, good. And the sun is shining. So we're grateful
Yes.
for that. So, okay, Krista, tell us a little bit about your background because you are such a gifted designer, but also patterns you've been doing for a long time. Not that long ago, you started into fabric, so for Text,
Hmm.
which we'll talk about that. You've written books. You are an amazing free motion quilter. Uh,
Thank you.
tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Okay, sure. So I've been quilting for over 25 years, and I've been doing it full time for about 12 or 13 years with my husband, and the kids, sometime or another have worked for us. And so I basically just started teaching quilting classes back in the 90s here in Las Vegas, and I fell in love. And I was mostly self-taught, and the best thing I could do is I started teaching quilting classes within a couple years after I learned, because I was just driven. I was so in love with quilting that I felt like I was on a mission to share the joy with as many people as possible. So this is 20 some years ago, do the math. I was in my early 20s, and the wonderful thing is I would teach these ladies, most of whom who were older than I, at the local quilt shops, and we had a great time. And it didn't matter if, there was an age difference or not. I loved being with these ladies and a few men.
Yeah.
And they taught me how to have a good time, and they taught me how to be a good teacher. And so basically since then, what I try to do is even though I'm known for machine quilting, I want to encourage people to make any step of the quilt that they like. I make all my own quilts, every step of it, and I can teach every single step, from cutting to basting to quilting to binding, so that no matter which part of the quilt you're having an issue with, I'm here to help you. And really, I would just say I'm a cheerleader.
Yes.
So back then, 20 some years ago, when I was teaching, I taught mostly traditional designs because that's all I ever knew. But the problem is even though I loved making these quilts, log cabins and Lone Stars and, all these traditional designs, I loved making them and teaching them, but I didn't use the quilts in my home. I didn't decorate with them. And I thought, well, there must be something wrong with me. Maybe they're not good enough. But it wasn't until really rather recently that I discovered why. It's because the quilts I had been making were not my style. They were very traditional, but everything changed when I attended the Modern Quilt Guild QuiltCon show in 2013. And all of a sudden, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I loved modern quilts. And so since then, my focus has switched from traditional quilt making to modern quilt making. And that's what I teach, and that's what I make, and that's what I decorate with in my home.
Okay, so that is so interesting, kind of that shift there. For those who are out there who are wondering, I bet you might be asking yourself the question, what would define modern quilting? Because I've heard all over the gamut what modern quilting is. What is modern quilting to you?
That is such a good question, because basically modern quilting is a style of quilting that's not new. It's been around, and I'll just tell you my quick definition. This is modern quilting according to Christa.
Okay.
Simple geometric shapes.
Okay.
Simple geometric shapes, bold color, clean lines, which means you can clearly see every patch in the quilt. And there's this term that I learned about recently called hard edges. It's an art term, hard edges. And what that means is, let me describe what it's not.
Okay.
So there's a very popular style out there called shabby chic and watercolor and blendy and painterly. Think of those beautiful terms. Modern quilting is the opposite of that. When you have these blendy, batiky, watery, shabby chic kind of stuff, it's a beautiful style, and one design blends into the next. Modern quilting is the opposite of that, in that it's very defined and chunky and hard and rigid, meaning that you can kind of see, a couple of quilts behind me, which we'll talk about. You can see every shape in the quilt. You can see a triangle next to a circle, next to a rectangle, whatever your design is. And it's very clearly defined where one shape starts and the next one ends. And so that's what I say, it's the opposite.
Okay, so that is interesting. Yes, I can see what you're saying there. And another interesting thing that I think about, especially when I look at your fabrics, and we carry your fabrics in our Sandy store, modern quilting, sometimes people think modern is just you've got to stick with solids. If it's solid, that means it's modern. But that's not really the case. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Oh, that's such a great thing, because that's what people bring up. So you might attend a modern show like QuiltCon, or you might see a quilt in a modern magazine, and while it is true that modern quilters do use a lot of solids. The reason they use solids is because when you have a white solid fabric next to a black solid fabric, there's absolutely that hard edge, that clearly defined line.
Yeah.
The definition, thank you, the definition. However, you can absolutely make modern quilts from printed fabrics. It's just, think of it like my fabrics, and you guys can see my fabrics at the shop and online. When you look at my fabrics, they're all very geometric. They're very colorful. When you look closely, they don't have a lot of color. For example, I might have a purple fabric, and maybe it's a purple fabric, like a little white geometric design on it, but it only has 1 or 2 colors. It's almost like some of the prints from the 30s where they only have maybe 1, 2, or 3 colors, not 20 colors along the selvage. Because again, the more color you have, the more depth you have, and the more blending you do. With my fabrics, they're very clearly defined. You can see the little design on the background. And so I'm here to say, every quilt I make now uses my fabric, and they're all made from prints. So, that's a long explanation to say you absolutely do not have to use solids, but you can.
No, that's actually really good to know. So when you're designing your fabric, where are you getting your inspiration from? What inspires you?
I love color, and I love shape, and I love architecture. So sometimes when I go out on a walk or I see pictures, if there's an interesting architectural element, an interesting geometric shape, I'm talking circles and squares and rectangles, very simple, basic, elemental shapes. I love combining them together. What would a design look like if I put a triangle on top of a triangle? If I mixed up a triangle with a circle? So very simple, but
you're one of those people who go into a bathroom stall and look at the ceiling or the floor tiles,
yes,
right?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I have pictures and pictures of my phone on tiles. Yeah. And there's a hashtag called I have this thing with floors, I have this thing with tiles that you can just, so yeah, if I had to describe what I like in one word, it would be geometric. I love geometric shapes.
That's interesting. So when you think about that, everything out in the world is what's inspiring you, because you go around and if you see a bridge, if you see a building, if you see whatever it might be, those are the shapes that are giving you inspiration of what you want to do next, right?
Yeah, and you kind of break it down to its most elemental, because you think, oh, well, everything has a shape. But the difference between, different types of design, this modern clean, you hear the idea of clean lines, it means if you see a shape out there, you can take away all the distractions and get it down to its fundamental shape. So you would think of, like, you would see a rectangle and that's all you would see. A more complicated design would be a rectangle with some dots, with some scrolls, with some fleur-de-lis, whatever. So the more busy the design gets, the less modern it is. The more simple and clean a design is, the more modern. It's very. Yep. Think of a tabletop. Think of a table with square legs and a square top. Now think of a table with intricate scroll work. 2 completely different designs, two different ideas.
I love that. That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
For sure. So let's take a look at some of your quilts that you have to share with us today, and I'm going to bring up some pictures on my screen as well while you do that.
Okay, awesome. So the first one behind me is called Bling, and it's one of my patterns, one of my new patterns, and Kris has it there. So here's the pattern. I've actually made it with a white background and a black background, and the black background is hanging behind me. And so in addition to liking simple geometric shapes, I love quilts that can be made out of pre-cuts because I want to show off the fabric. Now, I love machine quilting, which we'll talk about in a minute, but I really love bold, bright, colorful fabric. So what I want to do is I want to be able to say, how can I show off fabric and how can I work with a simple bundle? So this Bling quilt, it's made from 20 fat quarters, any fat quarters you want. And here's my color theory in 5 seconds or less. Pick any fabric you like, pair it up with a very, very light fabric, such as white, or a very, very dark fabric, such as black, and you've got an instant hit. And so, color theory in 5 seconds. whatever fabric you want with a contrasting background, and that's what I did for my Bling quilt.
Well,
And so really
look at
fun,
that.
really easy.
I love how you've got one pictured with white background, one with the gray background or black. Is it gray or black?
Black.
Black. Okay.
It's black,
And
yeah.
and I mean just oh, I love it. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And, so it's like any fat quarter bundle you have, anything in your stash will work with that pattern. So I've got some more. I kind of like this like virtual trunk show that we're having
Okay,
here.
yeah, I do too. So this is called Bling Quilts. Bling.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I
Bling.
love that.
It's kind of like when you look at the block, it almost looks like a diamond. If you look like a diamond ring, like a modern abstract
Oh,
version of a diamond ring.
I like that. Smart. Okay. What do we have next?
Okay, so the next quilt that I want to show you, you can kind of see it behind me on the top of my ladder, and it is called, it's like your children trying to remember the names of your children. It's called Dot and Dash.
There you go.
And it's from actually my book. This is my most recent book that came out a little while ago called Piece and Quilt with Pre-Cuts. And so this is one of those things, just like people say, oh, modern quilters can only use solids, which is not true. Sometimes people will say, oh, when you're making a modern quilt, you can't use pre-cuts. Well, this book is full of modern quilt designs made from
Love
pre-cuts.
that.
And so this Bling quilt right here, I call this my modern Jellyroll quilt. Because again, color theory in 5 seconds. Pick a Jellyroll and pick a contrasting background. In this particular quilt, I used a gray. The one I showed you previously was a white background or a black background. This one is a gray background. And so if you had any of the grays, like you put it together with a gray background, if there were any of the gray fabrics in the Jellyroll, then you could just pull those out and everything would contrast. And it's called Dot and Dash because it kind of looks like Morse code with the little dots and the little
I
dashes.
love that.
And it's just one Jellyroll plus background fabric. Easy peasy,
Ooh.
has that interesting, very minimalist modern design, and it's a fan favorite.
It is definitely a Kris favorite right now. I'm thinking,
Oh,
how
thank you.
fun would it be even just like with my stash? Because heaven knows I've got a stash that I'm going to cut into 2.5-inch strips and use that, right? But if you want to
Exactly.
make it even easier, Jelly Roll. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love it.
Jellyroll, background fabric. Yep. And then also from that book, the next one down on my ladder is called Starstruck,
Okay,
and
I'll
it
bring that
is
over.
made from fat quarters. And the interesting thing,
Mm.
while she's pulling that up, so again, that's from my book, which she has. In the book, there's 11 quilts, and I made them before I started designing fabric. So every single quilt in the book is made from a different fabric. This
Mm.
remake that she's going to show up on the screen, Starstruck, is actually made with my fabric. And in the book, the quilt is in black and white, and then I did a day glow color with lots of fabrics. But one little tip I want to
Mm.
talk about with color is you can get good contrast when you use bright colors by pairing up groups of colors that work really well together. For example, when you look on the picture, if you see like a light green and a dark green,
Hmm.
that's going to give you contrast. And if you do a light blue and a dark blue, even though those fabrics are very intense, you can
Hmm.
still get that good contrast, and you can see the hard edges of those stars, the clearly defined lines of each of those
Definitely.
individual blocks. So this one just takes like 24 fat quarters, including the binding, and you're good to go.
Oh
Very
my
simple, very
gosh.
easy.
I
This is
love
one of those quilts you could either go ahead. What were you going to
Oh,
say?
no, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say I love how the stars are offset. They're not directly in the middle.
Yeah, and that's just another element of modern design.
Hmm.
A traditional block would be that block would be centered, and you would line that up perfectly, and that's a great looking design. If you just want to get your feet wet with modern quilting, this is a perfect design for you because it has those traditional elements of a star block which you recognize, but you just make it a little bit off kilter, and that moves your eye around the quilt and it gives you a little bit more interest. So to me, that's a much more exciting quilt than if the blocks had all been laid out and matched
Hmm.
up perfectly.
I know, which is really fun. In fact, Nancy, I'm gonna bring her comment over here. She says, Nancy says, love this quilt. So fun for a kid's bedspread.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
I think that's a great idea. How fun!
Thank
I
you.
love it.
Well, and what
Okay.
was fun about getting to design fabric, and I'm so excited that you have my latest line, which we'll show in a minute,
Yeah.
is that from the beginning, even back when I made traditional quilts, I collected bright colors. I collected novelty prints because that's what I was drawn to. And now that I get to design those brightly covered fabrics, I'm just in heaven.
Oh, I bet. I bet. This is just a dream come true for you. Okay,
Cool.
so what do we have next?
So the next quilt, this is probably, I know you're not supposed to have a favorite, but I think this is one of my favorite quilts. It's called Color Weave, and this one's a standalone pattern.
Yeah.
And it's kind of on the ladder there, all nice and folded up. So this is another modern Jellyroll quilt. And the trick with this thing, it's Color Weave. It kind of has a rainbow of color. You can use it either with my fabric, of course, or any fabric in your stash or anything that Kris has at the shop. The key is that you want to pick your favorite rainbow colors, and you need 2 strips of each color. So you need 2 reds, 2 oranges, 2 yellows, and so on and so forth. So this works really well for those Jellyrolls that maybe only have like 20 fabrics, and so they have 2 strips of each. Or, you know what I've seen some people do is they'll do it very scrappy, and instead of doing 1 red fabric, they'll use like 10 red fabrics, and it'll look like it kind of gradates downwards as it goes across. So anyway, I know I was kind of blocking.
I love it. But it's woven, back and forth. I love it.
Yeah, this design was actually inspired by my front door mat. Welcoming people into my home. It had this very simple woven design. I took a picture of it and I studied it, and I thought, how can I interpret that? How can I take that architectural element, that design element of this interesting woven mat, and how can I turn it into fabric? And this is also a good example. It's I call it very printy. There's not a solid in it. It's all prints. And this quilt actually hung up in QuiltCon last year. It hung up in, this year, yeah. It hung up in QuiltCon this year. So it really made me happy to say, look, here's a quilt in QuiltCon in the modern show that's 100% made out of print fabrics. So that was kind of fun.
That is cool. I like that a lot. A lot. I
can
see why it's your favorite.
Well, and again, it's got those just very, very simple lines, geometry, a great way to show off your favorite bright fabrics, which, that's what I like to do with my quilts.
Definitely. Okay. What's next?
So my next one that I'll show you right here that I have behind me is called Blooming Wallflowers. And so this one is also a pattern. And look real quick how it's these fun stars. She'll bring it up in just a second. It's got the fun stars, and then it's offset. So the idea there was I started with a simple basic shape, which was just a triangle and a square, and the block is made by using either the Tri-Rex rulers or the creative grids rulers that makes the triangle in a square block.
Like a 60-degree ruler, or are you talking
No, it's not a 60-degree. Okay. It's called the creative grids is called the perfect rectangle ruler and the triangle and a square ruler. Okay. And so and I'm sure you carry those or something similar in your shop. And so basically, I'll give you a little hint here. The whole pattern is made from that one shape, just rotated and colored. And so when it comes to designing my my quilts, they look more complicated than they are. It's usually 1 or 2 basic shapes repeated, and the design comes from the coloring of how you lay out your colors on your quilt.
Yes.
And so, and this one actually hung in QuiltCon last year. So again, two of my quilts. So, and it's interesting. So that's a modern quilt. This is probably one of my most modern quilts. If that appeals to you, then you would like it. And of course, I always say, if it doesn't appeal to you, that's okay. We'll still be friends.
That's right. Exactly. No, I love it.
Thank you.
I'm starstruck. How's that?
Oh. But again, it's what I realized is that I love machine quilting, but machine quilting is not the star of the show in my quilts. What's the star is those that allow you to show off your favorite fabrics.
Exactly. Yeah, this is a fun way to use triangles. I love it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
So I think you've also...
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just answering a question for Susan that the name of the quilt was Starstruck.
Yeah. Oh, the one from the book. This one right here is Blooming Wallflowers.
Oh, Wallflowers. Sorry. Yep. Wallflowers. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. So now those are some fun, bright stuff. what I'm really excited to show you now is my latest quilts that I've made from my gridwork fabric, which you have the complete line. So anybody can make some super fun quilts with that or anything they have in their stash.
Yes.
And so along with that, let me see. I'll show you, if you want to bring up one of the quilts, it's called Blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really fun about this, so this again is a pattern, which you have, it's called Blockchain. It's made very simply from one charm pack of the gridwork fabric, the little 5-inch squares, and it has all the colors on the back of it. And so it's actually a design I came up with a while ago before charm packs got really popular. Then I re-released the pattern so that it would use charm squares, because before you had to kind of cut a funky shape. Now you can make it with charm packs. And then what's really fun is you pair it up with, again, highly contrasting gray, highly contrasting black fabric. And I'm not sure how the resolution is, but I'm going to hold this close so you can see.
I love this print of yours. I'm just saying, I love it.
This print is based on a traditional design called Broken Dishes, which is just triangles. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to put that design, a lot of times with my fabric, I want to put either machine quilting designs in my fabric or traditional pieced designs in my fabric to show how well they work. So that's the background. And then this other, I call this the accent fabric. It's this black that has a very subtle grid on it. Mm-hmm. So from a distance, it looks solid, but it has some texture. And then probably my favorite fabric is this one that has this really fun little circles on it. This was inspired by some tiles that I saw when we were on vacation. There was this little bath mat in the bathroom that had these little, they're called penny rounds.
Yes,
penny rounds,
yes.
These little circles. And I thought, how can I turn that into a fabric? So that's a fun binding print.
Oh my gosh. Oh, so, binding, I love that.
Mm-hmm. So with this blockchain quilt, I'm actually doing a quilt along on my blog now. Mm-hmm. Over the next few weeks. So if you just pick up a copy of the pattern from my girlfriend's quilt shop, the quilt along itself is free, and everybody's sharing their process, and I'm giving tips and how to machine quilt it, how to finish it, and it's had a really good response so far. People really like that one.
This one's the
so now
along. Blockchain.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, blockchain quilt along at. Yeah,
well,
and that's really fun.
I love the idea that you can do this with 5-inch charms. So, and just what a great way to showcase, an entire line of fabric. I love it. Love it.
Well, now that I'm a fabric designer, I want to make real quilts that people can actually do, because again, I keep hinting about this machine quilting, which we'll talk about. A lot of times when people practice their machine quilting, they do it on solid fabrics or muslin. Sure. But then how do you translate that? How do you actually quilt a quilt with these very busy, printy fabrics? Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of my quilts I try to show. So that's kind of fun. So next, I want to talk about terrace tiles, which is also one of my new patterns, very simple. On the front, I show one color, and on the back, I show 2 other colors. And I know Kris has images of these, and you can make this quilt in 3 different sizes. What I was really excited about with my latest collection called Gridwork is I divided it up into 3 different colorways. So the first one that she's showing on the screen, that is the Breeze colorway, the blues and greens. That's the one that's on your screen right now, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the blues and greens are these lovelies right here. So there's 9 colors in each colorway. So here's 9 blues and greens, and again, very geometric prints, very fun, some lime green, some purples, that wonderful gray, and kind of a white. And so all of these together, all you need is 1 fat quarter bundle to make that quilt. You can make it bigger with 2 fat quarter bundles or 3 fat quarter bundles of either the same fabric.
Fat quarter bundle, how many are you talking about? How many fat quarters?
So 9. So 9.
Okay.
The Breeze one's actually bigger, so I did 2 of these. So you could do half yards, and I noticed that you have them on sale for half. So for half, if you got 9 half yards, you could make the throw size, which you're showing now.
Ooh, I like that.
So that's the colorway.
That's fun.
And then I've got the same quilt in another colorway, either the amethyst or the citron. You can bring one of those up.
Let's bring on the citron.
Okay, so that is, I call this one kind of my most modern colorway. because there's a lot of black and white. There's that really fun high contrast. But again, look at this print. It only has 2 colors. This one, here's another black white, 2 colors, 2 colors. So even though these are very geometric fabrics, they only have a couple colors, so it's not too busy. It's very simple. There's some kind of citron green. There's that one black and white print I liked again. This really interesting stripe and some blue. And so again, all of these fat quarters together, this one bundle of 9 fat quarters will make that baby size quilt, which is up on your screen right now. So I've made the same quilt
size. They would get 9 half yards, right?
Exactly. Okay. Yes. First small half yards for the large, and then there's a queen size, which actually uses 3 fat quarter bundles or 3/4 of a yard. And I want to make one with all of the fabrics. I haven't done that yet. So I'll show you.
That would be fun.
I'll show you the other colorway, which is the pinks and purples.
Right here. Well, I have all 3 up there. Let's see. I didn't see a picture of just the pinks, so.
Oh, okay. Maybe I forgot to give it to you, but I'll just show you the fabrics. So this is the same thing. The Terrace Tiles quilt made from these purples. Let's see, I'll fold them this way. Again, that fun stripe, and then this really kind of like lavender. This one, which again, kind of a fun geometric stripe. I'm very cognizant to make sure I don't have too many directional prints, so a lot of them are like this one. I love this, that little hourglass design.
Me too.
So again, purples and pinks. Can you tell I just love fabric? I'm like, oh, I love it.
Don't you? Well, yeah, you're preaching to the choir.
So anyway, I love color, I love shape, I love making these designs. But what's really fun is, so after I make these really fun quilts made from pre-cuts that go together quickly, then I like to dive in to the machine quilting. And so that's what we can talk about machine quilting next.
Sweet. All right. I like it. I'm excited. Okay. Patty says, I think I'm a fan of modern too. Yeah. Sometimes,
Yay!
The interesting thing, and I kind of alluded this to you earlier, is sometimes we hear the term and we go, oh no, I'm not a modern quilter, or no, I don't do modern. And what you might not realize is maybe you are more than you thought you were. If you're loving the bright colors, if you're loving the geometrics, if you're loving those clear, the hard edges, you called it, then you might just be more leaning towards being a modern quilter. But there's no right or wrong, because we love it all, don't we?
That's true.
Don't we love it all?
We're just quilters. At the end of the day, we're just quilters, right?
And it depends on who you're making it for and what it for, too.
Yeah, and one time when I was studying, and I'm still studying design and quilting and things like that, because I feel like I'm a student of quilting, and I'll never graduate. But one of the best descriptions I heard is, think of modern like a line. You don't just make modern quilts. Maybe you're on this end of the spectrum that's more traditional. Maybe you're on this end of the spectrum that's more artistic or abstract. Right. But anywhere along the spectrum is fine, as long as you're having fun doing it. That's the important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, Kathy says I'm actually more modern than I think I am. So, yeah.
Yay! That's exciting.
All right. So, okay, you have amazing patterns that are so doable and just fun, and great ways to showcase some great fabrics. And you have wonderful fabrics that we absolutely love the bright colors. But another hallmark of Christa Watson is your machine quilting. And when you were here, how long has it been since you came and did a
It was about 3 years ago. It was back in 2017. Yeah. And I have to give a shout out, and the reason I remember that, because I was so excited to go to your shop, and I was trying to be a little too adventurous. I like to go out and hike and do things, and I had gone, this is a funny story, so I had gone to the climbing gym with my husband and son. This is an indoor climbing gym where you climb on the walls, and they have mats in case you fall.
Yes.
So I was very good at climbing. You know what I was not good at? Falling. So about a month before I came to your shop in 2017, I fell the climbing wall, and I injured my elbow.
Yeah.
And so I showed up, I called you ahead of time, and I said, I'm going to need some help. So I showed up in a sling, and you did a fun little FaceTime. And there I am teaching my quilting, you know, the one-handed quilter, and you and your staff were wonderful. You helped me pack my luggage. You helped me show my quilt. You guys allowed me to be the one-armed bandit, the one-armed quilter.
There you go. And you did a very good job of it, my friend. And I will tell you, that happens to be one of my most favorite events we've ever done here at the shop, because so many people walked away going, oh my goodness, I can do this, because the way you teach is so powerful, and you make anyone believe that they really can do it. So I have to give a shout out to you for that. So tell us a little bit more about machine quilting.
All right. Ooh, my favorite subject. So really, okay, so here's the thing I always like to start off when I talk to people. Quilters, they get intimidated because they go to this amazing show at Paducah or festival, and they see these award-winning quilts that took 400 hours and 3 years to make, and the winner wins $10,000, and you're so inspired. Yeah. And you walk away and you come to a quilting class and you quilt for 5 minutes. Yeah. And you're like, why can't I quilt like this award-winning quilter who's been doing it for 57 years?
Right. Yes.
And so what I try to do in my classes is I try to break it down, and I say, first of all, you'll get there. You'll make the award-winning quilt if you want to, but start with what you know and start simple. Just like I like simple geometric shapes in my piecing, I like very simple machine quilting. And the key, remember this, if nothing else, the more quilting you add to your quilt, the more texture and interest you're going to get. So I have some examples, some little, I'm going to hold these up to the screen. I'm not sure how the resolution is, but this is a little sample of a little block that I made. And this has
myself off here. There we go.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Let me see. So right up here, you can see that this interesting little block has all this wonderful texture, and you can see the quilting because I've used contrasting thread. So tip number 1, if you want to see the quilting, use highly contrasting thread. If you want to hide the quilting and hide the mistakes, use a blending thread.
That would be me. That would be me. I would be using blending thread all day long.
And all those quilts behind me, blending thread.
That's right.
This I'm showing so you can see on video, but this is like 10% of the quilts I do. Most of them I blend. But the other thing I want to show you with this one, all this is wavy lines. Everybody watching me right now can quilt a wavy line. You know how you do it? You actually do it with your walking foot, or if you have a machine that has a built-in dual feed, you can use that. And so basically what you do, there's no marking involved. You pick a seam on your quilt. And so we're going to talk about this seam in the middle, and you quilt not in the ditch, but near the ditch. And you just, with your walking foot, you just go back and forth like this as it stitches. And instead of a straight line, it's going to quilt a wavy, bumpy line. So you do a wavy line in the middle, and then you just fill in across the quilt wavy lines in one direction. I promise you, you guys go home right now, grab a little practice sample, an orphan block, and quilt a bunch of wavy lines. And your first wavy line might not look good. You might quilt 2 or 3 more wavy lines, and it might look like someone drew on your quilt, and it might not look good. I promise you, by the time you quilt 20 wavy lines, it looks amazing. So that wavy line with the walking foot. Now, if you want to graduate for something a little bit more, take these wavy lines and quilt them in 2 directions, and you get a wavy grid. Look how fun that is. Isn't that interesting? And look how the lines don't match up. And it's what I call perfectly imperfect quilting. Nothing is symmetrical, nothing is even. And again, this is white thread on purple fabric. If I were doing this on a real quilt, I would do it with purple thread on purple fabric. But how fun and interesting and modern and asymmetrical is that? So walking foot, quilt lines one direction, rotate your quilt wavy lines in the other direction. Like I said, do this kind of thing while you're quilting. Boom, you got 2 designs you can do right there with your walking foot, no experience needed.
I love it. Oh my goodness, that seems so doable, Christa.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a few samples to go through. And again, it depends on whether or not you can see them. Every time I make a quilt, real quick tip here, I make a sample. I make practice blocks with the same fabrics so that I know what the quilting is going to look like before I do it on the quilt. I would rather take an hour, maybe 45 minutes to make this and decide if I like this or not, and then change my mind. Nothing is worse than quilting your queen quilt and quilting this much quilting, deciding you don't like it, and then putting your quilt away and having a UFO pile because you didn't like what you did. So take an hour, make a practice, and then decide your thread, your batting, your color, your quilting design on a sample first. That's where my samples come from. Every sample I'm showing you, I went on and made that quilt later on. So this one, again, question, go ahead.
No, Sue asks, this machine quilting is not free motion, correct? But it is. It is free motion.
Okay, let me back up. What I do is different. Let me answer your short question with a long answer. I do walking foot quilting and free motion quilting.
Okay.
So the samples I'm showing you right now are not free motion because a lot of quilting instructors out there will teach you how to free motion, but I call that, running before you can walk. Yes. I recommend, and I'm a domestic quilter. I don't long arm. I just do a regular sewing machine like the ones you guys sell in your shops. Any of those machines can do this. If you do walking foot quilting first, that will give you the confidence that you know how to quilt, and then you can move on to free motion quilting. So when I teach walking foot first, and then I teach free motion so that it's you, it's not the machine. I don't know how to say that, but so that you know that you can quilt. Because so many people, again, try to sit down and free motion quilt, and they don't have the motor skills, they're not comfortable, and it scares them. So again, long answer, if you practice on walking foot and then you move up to free motion. So right now I'm just showing you walking foot. So thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, great question.
So this one I just want to show you, this is something you can do with straight lines. Straight lines are a little harder to quilt than wavy lines, but you can take a shape and you can either mark it out, or you can eyeball it, or you can use the edge of your foot for the spacing. And so you just back and forth, do from one side to the other one line of quilting. And really how you would quilt it, you'd turn it under the machine, so you'd probably be quilting top down, just depending on how it feels on your machine. Sure. And so you just fill in that interesting space. And in the background, you can't see, I've quilted a different design. So when you're trying to decide what you want to quilt one design, like a walking foot design in the block area, and then quilt a different design in the background. I'm going to show you a couple more with walking foot, and then I'll move on to free motion.
Okay.
So this is that same design. This is my charming chevrons, and you actually have the pattern. So there's those straight lines again, but here I'm going to get really close. I've got pebbles, and that I quilted that free motion. So a lot of times I will combine walking foot and free motion. I'll do all the walking foot quilting first, so I'll quilt all those lines, and then I'll go back in the empty spaces and quilt another design.
I love
So
that.
I'm just giving you the tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
All this stuff I'm teaching you is in my patterns, it's in my books, it's in my classes.
Yes.
So there's one. Okay, now let's see the last two more examples of what you can do with walking foot quilting. This is a block, a modern log cabin block, and I'm going to put it close. Check out the texture. Do you see that?
Yes.
That is done with a decorative stitch on your sewing machine. So again, you use it with a walking foot, and you can do a zigzag, a running stitch, a feather, a serpentine stitch, and you could do that when you're demoing your machines, Kris. You can show them, oh, here on this baby lock or this Janome, here's a fun stitch that can do that. And so basically what you're doing is you're just putting texture on the quilt, but instead of you making the wavy line, you're just putting it through the machine. It feels like you're piecing. You're just putting the block under the machine or the quilt under the machine, but the stitch is going back and forth. And again, you can't really tell. None of this is marked. There's just random numbers of lines, and I don't even care. So like this is one block. I might make 20 blocks in a quilt, and each area of the quilt is going to have a different number of lines.
One thing I remember learning from you a few years back was, and this has always really stood out to me, is it's about adding texture to so it doesn't have to be perfect. It's about adding the texture to it. And I really appreciated that point of view from you.
Well, the thing of it is, if you quilt one line across your quilt, that's going to stand out like a sore thumb. And maybe that line is not perfect, it's wavy, it's kind of janky, but you surround that line with more lines of quilting, and you're hard pressed to find that original irregular line. The best way to hide your quilting mistakes is to add more quilting. And so that's all it is. Here's another little sample. I'll bring this close up.
Yeah.
This is using walking foot quilting and, well, actually walking foot quilting with straight lines and decorative stitches. So it's just a little star. I just quilted, you know, like a little star, like a pointed star. And then I filled it in with the wavy lines of the decorative stitch. So again, just an interesting, texture.
A couple questions here, Christa.
Sure.
Betty asks, might be a novice question, but do you have to back stitch while quilting?
That's an excellent question. Not a bad question at all. I love to teach beginners, and I love to teach all levels, and I always tell everybody the worst question is the one you don't ask. So please ask away. So 2 questions to your answer. Do you have to back stitch with quilting? Let me bring this sample back. Pretend like this is a big quilt. If I'm starting in one corner and I'm going all the way to the other corner, or if I'm starting here and going all the way down, I call that quilting off the quilt. In other words, you're going to start quilting up here in the batting. You're going to stitch your line and you're going to end in the batting, so you don't have to lock your stitches, because those little thread tails are going to get stuck, and then you're going to trim that off and bind it. So if you can stitch a design from edge to edge, you do not have to tie off your stitches. However, if you do start in the middle of a quilt, then what I recommend is taking a bunch of teeny tiny stitches to begin with, then doing your normal quilting, and at the end, ending with about 8 to 10 tiny stitches. Anybody that has ever tried to unpick stitches, you know how difficult that is to come out. So if you start and end with teeny tiny stitches, that's going to hold it together. Now, if you want to pull up your thread from the bobbin and tie it off by hand, and then you could pop your knot in, you can do that. But honestly, nobody really cares. You know, that's not that noticeable. So tying off one knot is okay. Tying off 100 knots gets really old. So just start and stop with teeny tiny stitches, and you're good to go.
I always say, if it's not going into, like, I'm not trying to get a blue ribbon or something in a big show, then I'm not going to worry about it too much.
Well, and you know what? Going back to, I'll just bring this up. This color weave quilt right here, this one actually, I put it in my local show, and it got a ribbon. And if you were to look close up, you'll see all the wobbles and the bobbles. None of my quilts is perfect. And sometimes they still win ribbons, because it's more about, we could have a whole thing about quilt shows. I enter quilt shows. I've actually judged quilt shows before. It's not so much, especially with modern quilting, you want to do the best job you can, but it's not so much about the fussiness of whether your knots are tied off. It's more about the impact and the design, and how does that quilt make you feel when you see it. So don't stress about those knots. Don't worry about those knots. Nobody's going to care.
Good.
So you're going to go.
Good to know.
Now I've got a few samples that I'm going to show you with what I did with free motion quilting and how I combined walking foot and free motion in the same quilt. So this right here, this is a sample block. This is called improv piecing. Do you see all that fun? This is a great way to use up your scraps. And this is a block. Actually, you can kind of see, I'm going to hold up this book. There it is in blue. There's a whole quilt made out of those fun improv. And so this was my sample piece for this one. And so what's fun, again, this is the star of this quilt right here, is this fun scrappy fabric. So you can just use up your scraps to make that. But what's really interesting is all that free motion texture. Do you see that?
Yes,
that
I love it.
Is what I call, this is improv piecing. This is improv quilting. You take you quilt a bunch of different designs, and it's really, really fun and interesting. So I'll kind of show you that a little bit later.
Oh my goodness, wow.
So look at this again. Because this is so busy, this is printy and busy, you don't see the quilting. I'll show it really close. It's just lines. It's just lines.
Yeah.
In purple thread. Because you're not going to see that, I'm not going to spend hours and hours quilting that. I'm going to do a simple design, and I'm going to draw it out for you on a piece of paper real quick. So basically, when you're doing free motion, here I'm going to write FMQ for free motion quilting.
Okay.
When you're doing free motion quilting, I don't want to mark anything. I don't want it to be perfect. I don't want it to be symmetrical. I want it to be interesting and flowy. You're just quilting, and real quick, when you free motion quilt, all you do, you drop your feed dogs and you become the feed dogs. What I mean by that, let's say here's your quilt and here's your needle. Okay, if you stitch, let's see, let me do it a different way. If you're doing walking foot quilting or piecing, here's your feed dogs. The feed dogs are pulling the fabric through when you're stitching. So you're stitching and it's pulling the fabric through. When you free motion quilt and you get rid of the feed dogs, your fabric is not going anywhere. It's going to stay in place while you stitch.
Right.
So you become the feed dogs. And the way you become the feed dogs, you push the fabric through. If you push it left or right or diagonal, I call this the free motion hula. If you push it around, that's how you stitch in different directions. Walking foot goes straight. That's it. Goes straight. Free motion goes all around.
Right.
And it's a muscle memory that takes practice, just like learning to drive a car. You have to learn how to do the free motion hula and think of yourself on the beaches of Hawaii with the breeze. You're relaxing.
Right now. Yes.
Exactly. So number one tip for doing the free motion hula, don't stress about it. Just relax. So what do? You stitch lines like this. You just stitch in whatever, and you go back. Maybe it's bumpy. Maybe it goes this way. Maybe it goes up. Maybe it goes down. It looks a little bit like a hot mess because I'm drawing with black on white, and you can see every wobble and bobble. But just go in different directions and quilt these wavy lines, and that's exactly what I did in that quilt because you're not going to see it. So that's a very simple. That's your first free motion design if you've never done it. Lines. Doesn't have to be anything. So now I'll show you another one. If you want to actually do a shape more than just lines, a really fun modern shape, let's see if you can see this texture. These little boxes, do you see that fun little texture? This is on the practice block that I made. And so here you're just drawing squares. So we drew squiggles. Now let's draw squares, and I'll show you what that looks like. I'm gonna flip over my little paper. I'm basically giving you guys kind of the cheat sheet of what I do in class. We draw a design and we stitch a design. We draw a design, we stitch a design.
You know what, Christa? Once this is all over, I'm totally having you back because it really
I would love to come.
It was one of our best events we've ever done, and people walked away feeling so empowered. So we're having you come back, and anyone who's out there, I highly recommend you talk to your quilt shop owner and get Christa to come out to your to come speak at your shops because she is an amazing presenter.
Well, thank you. Well, what it is once I tell people that they can make mistakes and it doesn't have to be perfect, they relax and they drop their shoulders and it's okay.
Yes.
And so if you can scribble or sketch, you can do it. Definitely. So what I'm going to do, actually, let me pull this paper up. I'll show you just a couple more. So if you graduate from wavy lines, this boxes design, this is what it looks like. You could grab a piece of paper, rewatch this later, and you just do a line and a square shape, and a line and a square shape, and a line. And you just do this all over your area that you're quilting until you do that. And again, it doesn't look pretty here, but it sure looks pretty here.
Absolutely. It looks amazing there.
And you can do that on a block, on a whole quilt. I have, lessons and stuff later about how you figure out your pathway across the quilt, and that's a whole nother issue. But you just take a design, you draw it out. If you like more curving designs, you could do, instead of square boxes, you could do another popular one, which people like, which is loops. Mm-hmm. So here, start with the line and just do some circles randomly. This is kind of a fun, interesting angle. But these are called loops, and you know what? If you cross over, not the end of the world.
Well, that is what a lot of people think, is that, oh no, heaven forbid you cross over a line. Not all is lost, is it?
Exactly. I'm going to show you a couple more textures, but it's basically the same idea. And again, in my books and in my patterns, I give quilting suggestions. You can take your finger and trace over the design and figure out how to do it. So let me just kind of show you a couple, and you can practice these on your own. This right here, you've got some interesting, look at those swirls.
I love those.
And stipple. But again, the key, it's very densely quilted. Some of these stipples are sharp. Some of the swirls are more like squiggles. You can't tell because all you see is the texture. These are so imperfect. Another one, like right here, this is called these are called switchbacks. Really interesting. This one right here is called like ribbon candy or crazy eights. Oh, wait, here we go. I'm trying to hold it. And so you can just figure out, it's like that game. How can you figure out a path around your quilt without starting and stopping? And I show how to do that in my books.
You know, and another interesting thing to me, Christa, hold that up again just real quick.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's because instead of doing like being overwhelmed by doing an entire piece all at once, I like how you've kind of broken it up into blocks, because we can all do small areas rather than focusing on something so huge at one time.
Exactly. And when in class, we practice on small. And then, of course, everybody says, well, how do you do it on a big old quilt? You do it one block at a time. When you're quilting, like a big quilt like behind me, I just start on one edge of the quilt and I focus only on that block. And I shove and I scrunch and I smush the quilt through the machine. But I'm only focusing on one block at a time. I never quilt more than this, no matter if it's a baby quilt or a big quilt. And what's really nice about the machines, like when people are in the market for a machine, if you can afford one of those machines that has the extra throat plate, oh my goodness, that's a game changer. Huge game changer to have more room to shove and start the machine. Yeah. So I have one more or two more samples for you.
Okay.
Okay, so this one, here's another chevron. Check this out. You see that fun kind of swirly and then the pebbles and then this other design? So this is, I'll kind of break down a little simple, how do I quilt it? So the first thing I do is I look and I say, okay, what do I want to feature in this quilt? And this particular quilt, I really wanted to bring attention to the chevron blocks. So that's why I quilted a really jazzy design. And I wanted the gray to kind of recede and be more of the background. So I knew, first thing I did, I'm going to quilt two different designs. One design in the blocks and a separate in here. This is called custom quilting, where you have different designs in different areas of the quilt. This one is called an all-over design because the design goes no matter what the piecing is. But when you want to get more into custom quilting, you have to break it down. So I quilt these areas separate from this. And the key to make this work and not get overwhelmed, first thing you want to do is you want to anchor your quilt. You want to stitch in the ditch to hold your quilt together to add more quilting later. So you don't see the ditching. You don't see it at all. In fact, I kind of use contrast on the back. Let me see if you can see this. There's right there's some of the ditch stitching, but you don't see it on the front. So what you do is you just start. Yeah, you just start either here or here, and you stitch in the ditch to here, stitch in the ditch, stitch in the ditch, stitch in the ditch. And think of it like if you're coloring, you're outlining what you're doing. You know, you're taking a coloring page and you're stitching around the outline. So you're stitching around. I'm not stitching in the ditch here. I'm not stitching in the ditch there because that's a separate element. So I'm ditching around the outside of it, and I do all of that with the walking foot. Here, 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 here. And then it looks like this area gets poofy and it's held together. So now this section right here is not going anywhere. It's anchored and secure. So then I'm going to go in, and if you can trace an unbroken line across your quilt, you don't have to tie out. Here's my unbroken line. Here and there and there and there. And then this one. Here, can you see how my hand flows all the way across? So I quilt that design, then I come back and I do the same thing. Do you see all this gray? You can go like this, and then right here, you can cross over and you can fill that in. So this is kind of a hard way to show how I do this. I actually, when you're in class, I kind of go over it more in detail, and you can watch me do it.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you.
But the idea, let me show you again on the back. You can see the ditching. You can see the swirls. You can see the other design. And it just adds a lot of interest. And so it looks really complicated, but even though these are swirls and pebbles, you could do stipple in here. You could do some linear designs in here. You could pick any design you like, but the idea is you do a different design in those two, and it shows it off really nicely.
I love that. I love that. So
All
there's
right.
no harm in going back and filling in some areas that need a little more quilting.
Exactly. If you stitch in the ditch, because that's what everybody says, oh, just stitch in the ditch.
Yeah.
Stitch in some of the ditches.
Yeah.
Your quilt's going to stay together. Finish your quilt, use it, love it.
Yeah.
Then when you're more comfortable, go back in and add more quilting as you get comfortable. All right, you want to learn one more fun design, what I call the piece de resistance, the grand finale of quilting?
In just a second, couple more questions before we do.
Sure.
Carol asks, do you stitch in the ditch the whole quilt first or just one section at a time?
Let me what I do. Actually, yes and no. Let me show you. Get you a couple. I love this. I love real stuff. Okay. So first of all, going back to this, I don't stitch in every single ditch. So like these are all pieced, not stitching there. The ditch is here, here, and here. So I do that. That's like step one. Then I come over here, and that's step two. And that's my only ditching. Okay. Then I go back and I free motion this and free motion that. So number one, I ditch. Number two, I quilt the block. Number three, I do the background. Now to answer her question, if I had 20 blocks like this all together, yes, I would stitch all the ditches first. Then I would do all the blocks. Then I would do all the backgrounds. Going back to this one, here's a little bit of a version like that, okay? So I've got these blocks, pretend this is like a mini quilt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make that unblock. So I'm not going to ditch here or here because that's in the block. I'm going to here ditch, ditch, ditch right there. Okay, ditch here, 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 here. Do you see how you're just kind of following the outline?
Right.
And then you're going to come back up and maybe over here, you know, like this along the outside. So again, you're outlining and you're holding it together. Another way I could stitch in the ditch, so what I just showed you is I went around the outside of the shape. Another way I could stitch in the ditch is I could stitch in the ditch here this way between the blocks.
True.
And I could stitch in the ditch that way between the blocks. So there's more than one way to stitch in the ditch.
That's
the idea is it holds it together. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it does. That's great. Okay, show us your last one on that.
So this is what I call the improv. This is where you take 5 or 6 or 7 of your most favorite machine quilting designs and you mix them up, you mash them together. And I'm going to show you how you would draw that out.
Okay. And
the beauty of it is it's an individual piece of art, no matter what quilt, what time, when you do it, it's different every single time. So let's pretend this is my quilt and I'm just going to start anywhere. I might start off doing some loops and then maybe, let's see, can you see that? And then I would go into like a swirl like this.
Okay.
And then maybe I'd come back around and then maybe I would do some pebbles around the outside. This is really messy because this is a really weird angle, but look how fun that is.
No, we can.
So maybe I would do some pebbles. Then maybe I'd go around the little pebbles and I'd outline them. And then maybe I would do some lines like this and fill in some spaces. Then maybe I would put a little geometric shape in there. Maybe I would do some little leaf designs, echo around where I need to go. Maybe I would do some of the boxes to make it interesting and modern. And then maybe, let's see, I love doing a little like loop kind of design like this, or little,
it's like you're telling us there's like no right or wrong way. You just have fun with the process.
So look at that. Again, that's kind of a hot mess. Normally I would be doing it at a different angle, but that basically turns into that with a matching thread. And you can do that anywhere on your quilt. You know, solids to kind of show you what you're doing. But again, all of the quilts I've shown you have these different types of designs. In fact, I want to show you one other little thing, if I can grab what I just thought about. I want to grab my, my blooming wallflowers. So my blooming wallflowers, you can't see the quilting on this because it's very busy, but I'm just going to show you a close-up of the stitching there's a little diagram. Let's see, there's a little diagram right there that
Yes.
shows you, oh, you can do little pebbles and you can do little,
I like that.
you
It
know,
gives us an idea of what we could do.
yeah, and when you see the quilt close up, you can see it. So again, my quilting is not about showing off my machine quilting. It's about enhancing, it's about having fun and adding texture. And the number one bonus of that is that it looks great and it's completely random, irregular, and imperfect.
I like what Kathy says here. She says, if you can't draw it, you can't free motion quilt it. Get a pad of blank paper and doodle, doodle, doodle. It's training your muscle memory.
Exactly, which that kind of leads into, you want to show them a sneak peek of what's coming up?
Yes, definitely.
So I've taken all my little doodles that I can think about, and I'm putting them together in a book that's going to come out later. So right now I have 3 books out now that give you the piece pattern, like some of the ones behind me, and they show you how to quilt that particular quilt. Mm-hmm. My newest book that's coming out is called 99 Machine Quilt Designs.
Okay.
I've taken all of my most favorite designs. Yeah, she's got the cover of it. And basically the entire book is full of 99 samples showing with little illustrations what you can quilt on different quilts. So it's really fun. You guys are the first people that I'm telling about it.
Woohoo!
And so that's that. And in the book, there's actually double the amount of designs because each one is stitched out, 99 different stitch outs. But then I give you an alternate suggestion for all 99. So what's that, 198 designs actually in the book.
Wow, that is great. That is great. So when does this come out?
I don't have a final release date. In fact, this is just for you guys to see this. This is just a draft of the cover. It's being in the editing process right now, and it's going to come out sometime summer or fall. Ooh. So I'm guessing July, August, September.
Oh, I'm excited. Oh my goodness,
Kris.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I love it. So let's see. We have what advice do you have for getting a big quilt underneath your machine, your domestic machine?
Well, first of all, I would say, and let me ask you this, Kris. Do you guys in your shop in the quilt center, do you guys have the furniture? Do you guys sell the furniture for the sewing machines?
We do.
Okay.
Furniture and TaylorMade. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to tell you this to your customers. If you're on a budget, buy the table first and buy the machine second. Oh. And the reason why, you can change which machine you put in the table. The table is actually more important than the machine. It's wonderful to have the bells and whistles, and they've got all the different models, and you can